Okay, hello, my name is Cristina Garrigós and I teach Literatura Norteamericana 2 at the UNED. And today I'm going to talk about Toni Morrison's Recitatif, which is a short story that Toni Morrison published in the anthology Confirmation, an anthology published by Amiri Baraka, Leroy Jones, and Amina Baraka in 1983. Now, you have biographical information on Toni Morrison on many websites, especially her official one, and you have information in the Norton Anthology of American Literature in the introduction to the story. You can read about her life, but just a few things. Toni Morrison was born in 1931 in Ohio. After getting her BA and her MA in English, she worked as editor for Random House before publishing her first novel, The Bluest Eye. And since then, she taught at different universities, like Princeton, while writing her fiction. She has written 11 novels, 2 short stories, and several nonfiction works. Among her novels are The Bluest Eye, Sula, Song of Solomon, Tar Baby, Beloved, Jazz, Paradise, Love, A Mercy, Home, and God Help the Child. These are her novels. And she won the Nobel Prize in 1993. She was the first African-American person to win it. Now, Morrison's novels have been considered postmodernist, as we said the other day, but they differ from the works of authors such as John Barth, Donald Barthelme, or Rob Okuva, in that they are not so interested in metafictional games, but they combine realism with fabulism, refocusing their gaze on the daily world, according to the Columbia Literary History of the U.S. Her works combine fantasy and realism, using folklore and myth with references to historical episodes such as slavery. Her novels deal with issues of the U.S. history, the idea of the cultural identity of the African American people, and especially the role of women in a patriarchal society. She has innovated through the use of narrative voices, in The Bluest Eye or in Beloved, for instance, and the free use of time and the mix of reality and fantasy. Beloved is considered as one of the most important novels of the 20th century. She won the Pulitzer Prize with it, and it tells the story of a former mother, Sitha, a former slave, who is haunted by the ghost of her daughter, whom she killed while trying to spare her from suffering what she had suffered as a slave. As such, slavery is one of the major themes in her novels. Hence, the political significance of her text, which combine experimental fiction with the innovative treatment of social and political issues, a characteristic that we have been calling the second generation postmodernism. Now we are going to talk about Recitatif. Recitatif is the story of 2 girls, Twyla, the narrator, and Roberta, who meet at a youth shelter. The only thing we know about them is that they are very close and that Twyla's mother danced all night and Roberta's was sick, implying that neither of them could take care of their children. But we are not given much information. This is the first sentence, as you know. My mother danced all night and Roberta's was sick. Now, the readers do not have any indication of anything, basically. We don't know the ethnical background of any of the girls, but we know that they are different. The minute I walked in and the big bozo introduced us, I got sick to my stomach. It was one thing to be taken out of your own bed early in the morning. It was something else to be stuck in a strange place with a girl from a whole other race. Okay, notice that I've underlined a place with a girl from a whole other race, a girl from a whole other race, so meaning that they are different, right? Now, as we know, the narrator's mother, Mary, when she stops dancing, she has some prejudices about the other race, and she tells Twyla that they never wash their hair and they smell funny. Now, Toni Morrison challenges the reader and his or her prejudices, leaving it open to us to imagine who smells funny, that is, who is black, and who is white. Now, the girl is obviously prejudiced because she has learned it from her mother. Twyla admits that Roberta did smell funny, and she knows her mother will not like it, but they become friends, even though, as she says, we looked like salt and pepper. Now, the reference to salt and pepper is an indication of the white and black combination, but again, we don't know who is the salt and who is the pepper. Both are united in disgrace because their mothers have neglected them. They are not orphans, but they are dumped by their mothers who like to dance. One, we know that she likes to go out at night and she likes dancing. And the other is sick. Maybe she is an addict, or we don't know. I mean, like, all this information is left aside. Now, in the shelter, there are children from all ethnic backgrounds, but they are not neglected or ignored. Their parents are dead. In the case of Roberta and Twyla, they are neglected by their mothers, and this creates a bond between them. At first, she says, we didn't like each other all that much at first, but nobody else wanted to play with us because we weren't real orphans with beautiful dead parents in the sky. We were dumped. Even the New York City Puerto Ricans and the upstate Indians ignored us. All kinds of kids were in there, black ones, white ones, not even two Koreans. Okay, so they are different. We have a spatial reference here. I mean, we imagine that this has been, this shelter, right, is close to New York City, or it is in New York City, right? And upstate Indians mean the state of New York. Later on, we will have more spatial references to Albany, the capital of the state of New York, right? Okay, so all this information, I mean, that we have, that is given, that is hidden in the text, tell us that Mary, who is Twyla's mother, is not affectionate. I mean, like she's a kind of not very mature person. She's unlike the Virgin Mary. I mean, the name Mary could make us think of the Virgin Mary. This one is not like the ideal mother. She likes to dance all night. She doesn't seem very virginal, and she doesn't nurture her child. For instance, you have this reflection on food. Mary's idea of supper was popcorn and a can of Yoo-hoo. Hot mashed potatoes and 2 Winnies was like Thanksgiving for me. So the story begins when Twyla and Roberta are 80 years old. They are looked down by older girls who are 15 or 18 or 16-year-old and who also live in the shelter. These girls are poor little girls who fought their uncles off but looked tough to us and mean. Okay, now notice the reference to fought their uncles off. Okay, so as meaning they are victims of sexual assault, of sexual abuse in their families, right? But this violence that they suffer, they project them on the little girls, okay, on the younger girls, on Twyla and Roberta. So in this shelter, the two girls find comfort in each other as they are deprived of their mother's love and they are victims of bullying by the other girls who, instead of protecting them, project, as I said, their violence on them. She says, they light out after us and pull out our hair or twist our arms. Again, notice this violence. Now, the orchard, as the place where the girls, the big girls meet, becomes a place of danger for Roberta and Twilight, and later a nightmare for the adult girls, or the adult woman, since it will hide a secret of their past and could reveal something about themselves, which that they try to conceal and they try to hide in their unconscious, as we will see later on. I used to dream a lot, and almost always the orchard was there. Now, Roberta and Twyla are not the only victims of the big girls. Maggie, the kitchen girl, who is mute and has leg as parentheses, was also made fun of when she fell. And we read here, nothing really happened there, nothing all that important, I mean, just the big girls dancing and playing the radio, Roberta and me watching. Maggie fell down there once, the kitchen woman with legs like parentheses, and the big girls laughed at her. We should have helped her up, I know, but we were scared of those girls with lipstick and eyebrow pencil. Maggie couldn't talk. The kids said she had had her tongue cut out, but I think she was just born that way, mute. I said before that Maggie was the kitchen girl. Sorry, she was an old woman. She was the kitchen woman. And notice how Roberta and Twyla are depicted here as mere spectators. First, Twyla, who is the narrator, she's telling the story. She's saying that nothing really happened there, nothing all that important. So, she is presenting that incident or that accident as if it was something unimportant. And also their participation, we should have helped her up. So the fact that the narrator, Twyla, is an adult when she is writing or telling the story, reveals also some cruelty on her part, because she talks about Maggie with cruelty. Actually, she says she wore this really stupid little hat, a kid's hat with ear flaps, and she wasn't much taller than we were, a really awful little hat, even for a mute. It was dumb dressing like a kid and never saying anything at all. Okay, notice that I have underlined really stupid, really awful, even for a mute, and dumb. How she uses language, even as even as an adult, to refer to Maggie with a lot of sort of superiority, right? So the children can be as cruel, or even more, or these children, Roberta and Twyla, they can be as cruel as the big girls. So they also project their anger and their fear of the other to the one who is different. And they insult her because she cannot respond. She cannot defend herself. So they call her dummy and saying that she has bow legs. Now, the narrator shows some regret because, she acknowledges that they call her names and that she could not hear them. She says, and it shames me even now to think there was somebody in there, after all, who heard us call her those names and couldn't tell on us. Okay, so this is a reflection from the present, from the Twyla, who is a mature woman, and she is thinking about herself when she was an 8-year-old girl, and she was calling her names. So she's actually participating in the action, even though she wants to pretend that she was not. Okay, so here notice that she says, call her us names, so we participated too. Now, after the episode of Maggie's falling, and we will go back to that later, The narrator remembers the first time their mother came to visit them, a month after they arrived in the shelter. She says, I saw Mary right away. She had on those green slacks I hated, and hated even more now, because didn't she know we were going to chapel? And that fur jacket with the pockets lining so ripped she had to pull to get her hands out of them. But her face was pretty, like always, and she smiled and waved like she was the little girl looking for her mother, not me. Okay, again, I have underlined, I hated and hated even more now, showing this violence, right, that she has towards her mother, because she feels neglected and abandoned, right? And the mother, I mean, who is shown to be a young woman, maybe, who is not mature, or at least she doesn't act as a mature woman or mother, like she was the little girl looking for her mother. Now, Twyla is embarrassed because she thinks that her mother is not dressed appropriately for church. References to Mary being the little girl instead of Twyla point to the lack of maturity of this woman who likes to dance all night. Again, we don't know her race or anything. No references are made. Her identity is erased. Twyla has mixed feelings about her mother, and this is evidenced in the confusion between pride and shame, between a little year-old who needs her mother's love and wanted to be presented as a grown-up in front of the grown-up, of the big girls. Because as the narrator remembers, she says, a pretty mother on earth is better than a beautiful dead one in the sky, even if she did leave you all alone to go dancing. Okay, the reference to the dead one in the sky, meaning that the big girls, I mean, like they were orphans, right? Their parents were dead, and she had a mother, like Roberta, but she leaves her home alone at night to go dancing, right? Now, Roberta's mother is described as being big and religious. She was bigger than any man, and on her chest was the bigger cross I'd ever seen. I swear it was 6 inches long each way. And in the crook of her arm was the biggest Bible ever made. Okay, so the big cross and the big Bible are metonymies for this woman, especially later when she comes to pick up Roberta later on in the story. Now, unlike Mary, we never know her name, probably because Roberta Twyla doesn't have that information, and she's the narrator. So we see everything through Twyla's eyes, and we don't know the name of Roberta's mother. We only know that she is called the Big Cross and the Big Bible. Now, at church, Roberta's mother looks down on Mary and Twyla, literal and metaphorically. Okay, literal because she is very tall, and metaphorically because she refuses to shake Mary's hand. So Twyla describes Mary as being simple-minded. She says she's not too swift. She behaves inappropriately at church, cursing, crossing her legs, dressing in a way that is not appropriate for the church, groaning the whole time, not singing along the hymns, etc. And this makes Twyla nervous and inadequate to the extent that she expresses her desire to kill her mother, showing some violence in her that is strange for an 8-year-old. She says, all I could think of was that she really needed to be killed. So again, we will come back to this violence in Twyla later on. Food is also an episode, it's an issue in this episode when the mothers come to visit them. As Twyla remembers it, she remembers that while Roberta's mother brings chicken, milk, oranges, sandwiches, etc., Mary, Twyla's mother, did not bring anything. So both girls feel embarrassed of their mother's inability to act as they should. Roberta's mother for refusing to shake hands with Mary, and Twyla feels embarrassed because her mother does not act appropriately, and as a mother, she didn't bring any food and she didn't behave in church. So after this episode, when the girls are 8 years old, we jump in time, and suddenly we know that Roberta will leave the shelter, and Twyla will leave later on, and they will be separated, and then 12 years later they meet, right? So they are in their 20s now at Twyla's work, at the place where she is working. Twyla had already anticipated that she would work as a waitress, okay? So we already have that information. And now she's working at a fast food restaurant by the road, which is described as a place that is cheap and dirty. When she sees Roberta is described as wearing makeup, big earrings, and being with boys. And she says, making the big girls look like nuns. Now, Twyla's language is it's a reflection of her social class. She's not very well educated. She says all the time it was okay going to the Johns instead of going to the bathroom or the restroom, get them all, talk about lipstick, you know. So it's the way that Morrison reflects Twyla's narration is very colloquial. Now, when she mentions that she lives in Newburgh, Roberta and her friends laugh because Twyla obviously doesn't belong to the same social class as them. Later on, we will know that half of the population in Newburgh is on welfare. Roberta and her friends are on the way to the coast to meet, Jimi Hendrix, and suddenly we have a temporal reference that we didn't have before. If they are going to see Jimi Hendrix, this must be the 60s, right? Since Jimi Hendrix died in 1970. So this would mean that if the girls were 20, when in the 60s they were born, some time in the 40s, right? Now, after this awkward meeting, when Roberta does not acknowledge her friendship, her close friendship with Twyla in front of her friends, the narrative moves to Jamie, Twyla's husband, and a few years have gone by. Now, Twyla talks about her husband, and she refers to him as a very comfortable, as he's comfortable as a house sleeper. He liked my cooking, and I like his big, loud family. They have lived in Newburgh all of their lives and talk about it the way people do who always have known a home. So he's very different from her, and we don't know if she likes him because he's comfortable, because he has a family, because he's different in that sense. We know that Twyla was raised in a shelter, and Jamie is a family man. Newburgh is changing. Twyla's in-laws belong to a world that is constantly changing. We have references to that. Properties are changing names. Houses that used to be squatters are bought and renovated. So this is the beginning of gentrification, if you want. Rich people were coming to town, IBM, Food Emporium, gourmet food, new shopping malls where people consuming habits were growing fast. So we have references to this change in the American society. Now, after her marriage, Twyla doesn't work anymore. She has become a stay-home mother, as far as we know. And there are temporal references to the Brady Bunch show, a TV show that was aired from 1969 to 1974. Therefore, we know that that we are somewhere between 1970 and 1974. Again, Morrison uses this these popular references, Jimi Hendrix, the Brady Bunch Show, etc., to give us information about the time when the action is taking place, right? So now when these women meet again, it's the early 70s. We have references to computers that bring us to the 70s as a time of economic prosperity and development in the US, but also of social convulsions. This time, the time that they meet at the supermarket, Roberta appears dressed to kill, as we are told, with a white dress and diamonds. She is obviously rich, and there are references to her rich neighborhood, her limousine, and her Chinese driver. Again, an external reference to race, like that we saw before when they were in the shelter at San Bonis to the other children, right? So now Roberta is married to a rich man who is a widower with 4 children and who works with computers. So we don't know we know that one of them is black and the other one is white, but we don't know who is the black one and who is the white one, right? Again, we have reference to the race, but not specific information. We have, when they meet here, Twyla says, and I try to think why we were glad to see each other this time and not before. Once, 12 years ago, we passed like strangers. This refers obviously to the meeting, the place where she was working. A black girl and a white girl meeting in a Howard Johnson on the road and having nothing to say. One in a blue and white triangle waitress hat, the other on her way to see Hendrix. Now we're behaving like sisters separated for much too long. Okay, now again, basically we know that, that one is black, the other one is white, but we don't know who is who. She says, wait, no, I don't want to go to that, sorry. Later on, she says that she got, wait, sorry. Okay, she says, I was dying to know, wait, no. I'm sorry, I didn't want to mess this up, but okay, what I want to say is that there is a reference that Twyla makes to Roberta as being privileged, as having everything, right? As she said that she lives in Annandale, which is a neighborhood full of doctors and IBM executives, and that everything was easy for them. She says they think they own the world. Now, what does she mean by that? Well, does she mean that the world is easy for the rich or that the world is easy for the white people? So Morrison challenges our prejudices and the association of whiteness with richness and blackness with poverty, so that we may assume or not that Roberta is white and rich and Twyla is the black and poor one, right? So they have this thing going on, this miscommunication between the two of them, and when they meet, they start talking and they start remembering their time back at the shelter. So. And now, this is the good one, she says, I don't remember a hell of a lot from those days, but Lord, San Bon is as clear as daylight. Remember Maggie the day she fell down and those girls laughed at her? Roberta looked up from her salad and stared at me. Maggie didn't fall, she said. Yes, she did, you remember? Not Twyla, they knocked her down. Those girls pushed her down and tore her clothes in the orchard. I don't, that's not what happened. Sure it is, in the orchard. Remember how scared we were. Wait a minute, I don't remember any of that. So when they get together and they start recollecting their past together, they discuss this episode, and Twyla has erased all memory of what really happened. And now Morrison points out to how dark episodes are easily forgotten when people do not want to remember an uncomfortable truth. In other texts, she had discussed over the importance of not forgetting dark episodes in the history of the US, such as slavery, for instance, episodes that nobody, not even the black people, want to remember. Now, in this case, Twyla does not want to remember that she participated in a violent action towards Mary. She wants to erase this information because it makes her uncomfortable, and she ignores the reality of racism. When she asked Roberta why she behaved so coldly when she saw her at Howard Johnson, Roberta says, "Oh, Twyla, you know how it was in those days, black, white. You know how everything was, but I didn't know. I thought it was just the opposite. Busloads of black and whites came into Howard Johnson together. They roamed together then, students, musicians, lovers, protesters. You got to see everything at Howard Johnson's, and blacks were very friendly with whites in those days." So as you can see here, Twyla is negating, she refuses to believe the reality of racial segregation. Remember that in those days, we're talking about the 60s. These are the time of the civil rights movement. And here she says, what she sees are students, musicians, lovers, protesters. If there are protesters who are protesting for something, obviously. But what she refuses to see is the reality behind that, right? So what is uncomfortable, Twyla is just like she doesn't think about that. She has even actively forgotten, that is on purpose, that Maggie was black. And so when they talk later on at a protest, at a demonstration, right, Roberta tells her, she says, "Maybe I am different now, Twyla, but you are not. You are the same little state kick who kicked a poor old black lady when she was down on the ground. You kicked a black lady, and you have the nerve to call me a bigot." So now, after this confrontation with her past, a truth is revealed about herself that Twyla wants to hide and negate even to herself. Twyla and Roberta become enemies. They take different sides in this demonstration, right? And yet, they carry signs that do not mean anything, the one without the other. We have, I'm going to go back to the idea of the confrontation between the two, between Roberta and Twyla, when Roberta tells her that Maggie was black. She says, she becomes very agitated, right? And she says, what was she saying? Black? Maggie wasn't black. She wasn't black, I said. Like hell she wasn't, and you kicked her. We both did. You kick a black lady who couldn't even scream. Liar. Okay, so again, liar implies a negation on the part of Twyla. She doesn't want to admit that she kicked a black woman. Well, she doesn't want to admit that she kicked her. She doesn't want to admit that Maggie was a black woman. So again, as I said, I mean, like later on when they meet at a demonstration, both of them are presented as being like enemies. They confront each other. They carry signs, and these signs do not make sense, the one without the other. While Roberta has a sign that says mothers have rights too, and I'm sorry here because I think it's mothers in plural, mothers have rights too. Twyla says, and so do children. Then she has another sign that says, how would you know? And the other sign, the third sign says, is your mother well? So these three signs that Twyla has, they don't make any sense. I mean, people are confused because they see this woman in the street carrying a sign that says, and so do children, and how would you know, and is your mother well? And these signs do not make sense without Roberta. So even though they are enemies, that still they are like both sides of the same coin, right? Now, after this episode, the communication is broken for a while until they finally meet, and again they talk about the episode, about Maggie, about what happened to Maggie over again, because this time Roberta is, she feels guilty for what she said to Twyla about her kicking this woman and not admitting that she was white. So in the end, the episode of Maggie remains for the girl one thing they do not want or can't remember well. Neither of them know if Maggie was black or if they participated in the action of kicking them. Now both admit that they wanted to, because they wanted to kick their mothers who had abandoned them in the shelter, and they couldn't. So the story ends with a question, and I think that what really happened, I mean, we will never know what really happened. The girls don't know. You may infer, I mean, you, after reading the story, you may have your own conclusions, right? But here the important thing, I think, is that they try to forget. They try to forget what is uncomfortable for them. So, so in this story, what I wanted to discuss, I mean, with this close reading that I have done of the story, is that Morrison uses the narrative form, the style, right, as she experiments with form in the following way. She erases consciously all references to race and the mother's real reasons for leaving the girls in the shelter. Also, the narrator, Twyla, looks back at her childhood, and she reflects about her relationship with Mary, her mother, and Roberta, because these are things that are important for her as an adult woman. Also, the last part of the story, when Twyla and Roberta meet again after many years as adult women, this meeting serves them to revise the episode of Maggie falling in the orchard and see it under a new light, a new perspective. What is the truth, right? So we see, I mean, that this story develops several important issues which are central concerns for Morrison in all her novels in general. And I would say that we can find the main themes of Morrison's work in this story: race and racism, the identity, the issue of identity related to race, gender, and social class, the relationship between mother-daughter, relationship among women, the idea of sisterhood. Also, we have the theme of social inequalities and differences, violence, the abuse of some over others, and finally, the idea of forgetting versus and remembering, the idea of erasure. So in general, I think that this story is a good example of Morrison's narrative style, and it is a very good example of what I explain as the second generation, if you want, of postmodernist writing, a writing that is at the same time that it experiments with form, it deals with social and political issues, in this case related to race and gender and social class. Okay, and any question? You know that I would like you to participate in the forum and ask me any question that you want, and also send me an email if you want. I'll be happy to help you understand this story better, and so that you have your own conclusions, right? Okay, thank you very much.